Welcome to our second episode of the Xavier Files as a part of Cyclops' Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast where we are chatting with the voice of Gambit, AJ LoCascio. I'm JC.
And I'm Rod, and I'm super excited to introduce our guest, AJ.
Hey,
It's
what do you want
fine.
to know about me? I don't know. Hi.
So, AJ, we have a bunch of questions for you, but first, if for some reason somebody is watching X-Men and they haven't found you on social, let us know where they can find you.
It's just at my name, at AJ LoCascio. I think on Instagram there might be an underscore between it, but it's AJ underscore LoCascio. I don't know, it's photos of me now mostly, which is such a weird... It used to be things I find interesting, and then it became sort of, you know, when you're an actor, I guess your brand is you, so...
Well, we will definitely be talking about some of those pictures in the questions we have coming up.
I was going to say, the photos of you on your Instagram are quite famous now, so I'm pretty
I
sure
know.
people know the Instagram account.
That's so weird. Well, it's so weird. Just to hop into it, since we're talking about it, the photo of me without my shirt, that first, or there's two now, I guess. I've been working out with our mutual buddy James for like 3 years now, and I've always been very skinny, and I've always been very self-conscious about that. So for me, those posts are like, hey, I'm very proud of the work I've done, and I hit 400 workouts, and like, hooray. That was it. That was as far as I thought that would go. It was a big pat on the back. I don't even feel comfortable posting that stuff. So for a news article, like it was Out magazine, I was so embarrassed, but also very flattered. It's very weird.
That's great. I tell my friends, like, if I had any visible muscles whatsoever, I would show them as well. But
Constantly.
It's such a weird, because I don't know. You also, you know, when you take a photo, you're flexing. You're not, you know, you're holding your breath and you're like, "Rrr!" It's not like you look like that all the time. So unless you're James, but
There's a reason why Rod and I decided to do this as an audio-only podcast, so yeah, we get it.
Yep.
yeah, it's a lot of work. But
My TikToks start popping off once I start hiding my face, and that's not a joke. Anyway, some real quick housekeeping. Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode we can find. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men, the animated series, building up to the release of X-Men 97. We're going to be chatting about AJ's character and role in the episodes that have aired so far of X-Men 97, so there will be spoilers. If you don't want to spoil for you, pause the podcast, watch the episodes, and come back.
And finally, don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, you're making sure that you follow us on your favorite podcast services. But AJ, let's get into it. Obviously, everybody listening knows here that you're the voice of Gambit. It's going to be all over the metadata of this episode and all that fun stuff. But to just talk about what you've done as a whole, what are some of the other roles that you've had in your career that you're really proud of?
So I guess the first one, which was big, still big, was Marty McFly for Telltale Games. Was the first like big initial character that I did. That was the first thing I'd ever done professionally, which is still really wild. But Gizmo from Gremlins Secrets of the Mogwai. I voiced Thunk in all the Croods series. Han Solo, which I'm enormously proud of. My Prince Lotor in Voltron, as well as Griffin in Voltron, which was a happy accident. And oh god, I'm looking over at the characters on my wall. Domus in Ranking of Kings. Figment, I got to voice Figment, who I'm obsessed with from
Disney Figment?
Disney Figment. I got to do Figment in Disney Speedstorm, which is like a racing game.
Right.
And Figment hasn't had a voice in like 30-something years, so to be like the first one to get to voice him again in a long time was really surreal. But
I feel like Figment was like that hot thing, like when I was a kid and going to Disney for the first time at like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah,
and then
same.
nobody talked about Figment for like 30 years. So it's impressive that like you helped be a part of the revival of that character.
It's crazy when I did the audition for that, when I do auditions and I see that a character's coming back like Gambit or Han or Figment, or I'm like, I freak out. You know, I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, how do I get to be a part of this? And I had already studied Figment for years for just listening to Billy Barty's voice and actually trying to mimic it on my own in my booth for fun. And then when the audition came around, I was like, oh my God, I've been secretly studying this.
So I was going to ask this at a later point, but I think it's prevalent to like what you're talking about right now with Figment. Like, you know, are there different approaches that you take when you're preparing for a role when it is a character that has been established in some capacity, whether or not it's Gambit or Han Solo or Figment? Like, what's the process like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, they're all a little different. For Figment was definitely something that I wanted it to sound as much like the original as possible. But then ultimately, when you go in, they have their own ideas. So like I was hired basically to sound like the original Figment. But then when I went in, they went, let's do something new. I was like, what? And they were like, let's kind of change it up a little bit. And I was like, okay. So they wanted it to just be my voice, like as in it's Figment-like, but they're not speeding it up and they're not, or changing the pitch. And that happens. I mean, there's times where like with Lego for Han Solo, I always want to do a spot-on match or as close as I can physically get to doing a match. And sometimes that's not what they want. Like for some of the Lego specials, they want something that's more fun that you would never hear Han Solo do because it's Lego, where it's for kids, it's fun, and it's sometimes it's brighter or more absurd than you would ever hear Harrison Ford emote. But yeah,
just in his life as a whole.
Like
yes,
Pepper.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's great. I love it. But yeah, the preparation though, especially for Gambit, is I was just trying to get as close to Chris Potter in the original voice as I could. And then when I went in, they basically were like, good, let's do that. And then let's kind of play with it. And so we got to kind of mix it up here and there while we were recording. And eventually, no matter how close you want something to be, your own sensibilities and qualities are going to take over. Otherwise, if they don't, you have a really stiff performance. If you're just trying to match the voice, it can sound really weird. But yeah, I just listen to them over and over and over again and play them in the car. And this is the case with all these characters. It's just constantly hearing them in my head where I'm driving on the highway or whatever, just reading road signs as the character. And that's usually when I know I'm like, okay, I think I've got this now. Same with accents, when you're studying an accent, like just trying to say things that you don't have reference for and figuring it out by reading crap around the house,
Right.
Is kind of how I stretch those muscles.
Got it. And then, like, you mentioned the accent, obviously Gambit as a character, people already know what he sounds like, but you don't come across as somebody who's normally speaking in a Cajun accent. No offense meant, obviously.
No, none taken. Yeah, that's a weird one too, because so the way Chris originally did Gambit's accent, I think, was heavily influenced by, he mentioned Canadian French, and there's a sound that we all expect from Gambit. I mean, the way Gambit talks is a kind of there's a sound that is it's Cajun-like, it's Cajun-esque, and trying to sort of bridge the gap between what Chris had done and what we now sort of as modern people can access, podcasts and interviews and YouTube videos where you can hear people with Cajun accents speaking, trying to find the middle ground there without not sounding like Gambit, because we know what he sounds like. So it's hard, because you want to not offend anyone and not be like, that doesn't sound like a Cajun guy, but you also can't have it not sound like Gambit. So that was when I went in, we had a long discussion about that, about like, where are we sitting with where his accent is, and how authentic we want to be, or whether we just want to hear Gambit and then we'll throw in some Cajun elements here and there and phrases. And that's kind of more so what we went with. But yeah, Gambit's really hard. When I got the audition, I was kind of like, oh my God, he's complicated. He's a full gumbo of sounds and noises and accents and things, because it's French, and obviously American and Cajun, and there's all these things sort of at play. And then what Chris brought to it originally, you're kind of walking a tightrope carrying a million things. It's very weird.
We tend to joke, when I watch the show, the first time I watch it, no subtitles or anything like that. Rod will watch with subtitles on. In the original series, there is the episode Externally Yours, where it's him and all the other members of the Thieves Guild. I couldn't understand 90% of that episode, and I had to watch it with subtitles.
That's so funny. Yeah, I knew, so you said Externally Yours. Yeah, that was one of my favorites as a kid, because I loved just the tithe. Like that whole thing I thought was so cool, and I loved it. Bobby, like all that stuff is so great. I actually have a cell from that exact one where Bobby calls him on the phone. It's just Gambit on the phone and like with like a blank background.
Yeah, because he was in the danger room,
he's
control
in the danger
room at that point.
Someone's training, and he gets a phone call, and it's the 90s phone that's huge. And
he almost killed Scott.
Yeah. Is that what it is? Yeah, exactly.
I know I've been lucky enough to hear you talk about this in person at 2 different events, but not a lot of people have. Let's talk quickly about what it was like actually auditioning for the role and how that changed in the process for you as soon as you found out what the series was.
Okay, so the part of the story that I don't really feel like I ever tell is when I got the audition, I suspected what it was. I suspected it was X-Men 92 as a property. But I did not think in a million years it was a reboot or a continuation of the series. I thought they were going to do like an arcade beat 'em up or a mobile game, or because you get so many. I mean, the amount of auditions I get for Batman, which I've never landed, but like, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh, another Batman mobile game or a puzzle game or whatever it is. And you just assume like, okay, it's just God knows where that's going. And I thought that that's what this was going to be. It was like, wow, cool. neat. Like, I mean, it was cool. I was excited, but I just assumed it wasn't going to be this. But then the more I read and the more I looked into it, and I was looking through the packets of names and information, the more I was like, oh, this is a series. This is crazy. So I freaked out on that level. But so there were like 30 characters that were sent to us, and I was just looking through it for Gambit, and I was like, where's Gambit? Where's Gambit? Where's Gambit? And luckily Gambit was in there, but his name was like Ryan or something. I'm sure I still have it somewhere. I don't remember what it was, but I just did his audition. It had reference of Chris Potter from the original. It had a couple lines, and then it had like 6 or 7 lines of him, just whatever. It was just like random things from the comics or whatever, things that I couldn't go back and listen to reference for. So I had to basically just incorporate my understanding of the character and the accent into that. So I did it, and then I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again. This is at home. I just kept recording it, and then I sent it to my friend Carrie, who I know loves X-Men, and I sent it to like just a couple different people. I was like, hey, does this sound good? And then eventually I was like, all right, well, I've run out of time to send it out. And so I did, and then I got a call back, and I freaked out. When I say freaked out, I mean like Pee Wee Herman running around the house, like it's like like it's not a wow, cool, I'm so honored. It's like a full body, complete, explosion. Yeah, I was so nervous to go in and do the callback because I was like, this is X-Men. I can't mess this up. They were super cool. I think Bo was there, and Jake and Meredith, I think, were the 3 people who work on the show. Mm-hmm. And we just recorded the first 2 episodes. Then I didn't hear anything back. And then like a couple weeks later, they're like, all right, you got it. And I was like, oh my God. Like, now you got to record episode 3. And I was like, what about 1 and 2? And they were like, well, they're going to use what you did. And I was like, wait. Like, wow. What do you mean? So they used, we did do a couple pickups, but yeah, they apparently what's in the original was what I did in the, unless I'm remembering this wrong, was my audition, which is both flattering and terrifying because it's like, oh God, that was just my first go at this.
So you're the Christina Aguilera of X-Men.
That's what they say. Why? Because I'm a genie in a bottle? What is the? I don't get the reference.
You got to explain that, Rob.
Her song "Beautiful," like notoriously, it was her demo vocals. So like when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, she's amazing." It's like, yeah, those are the demo vocals. That's why there's some noise in the background. It's like one take.
Wow, that's what I think about Angela Lansbury as Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast, where she did. Apparently, she did "Tale as Old as Time" in one go. Supposedly. I don't know if that's true. They said it in, Waking Sleeping Beauty, the documentary.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I believe it. She's good enough to pull that off.
She's good, yeah.
Or like that's what they say about Adele in the studios as well. So you're like Angela Lansbury or Adele or Christina. That's what you are.
That's what I say. I say, remember, I'm like Christina, and then they kick me out for being weird.
That's crazy though. That the first 2 episodes were your audition.
The majority of it. I mean, it's weird. Awesome. I must have done pickups at some point. I don't know why I said I must have done pickups at some point, but they didn't. It was funny to hear Ray and some of the other actors be like, "Man, I recorded that episode so many times. How about you?" And I was like, "I only did it once." Would have been nice because then you get a paycheck every time. But yeah, it didn't help my anxiety because I assumed that because they did it once, they didn't like it and they were getting rid of me and recasting me because that's how an actor's brain works. But it worked somehow. I tricked him. I fooled him into hiring me.
It worked. So the show trailer hits. And everybody begins losing their mind when they see that Gambit charges up Wolverine's claws in what's effectively their own version of a fastball special. And Rod and I have been talking about this since the original trailer aired. What'd you think of when you first saw it between the trailer and the final version that aired? And does it have a name?
Belly Up. That's the name of it.
It's called Belly Up?
Because of the rest of the move. Because of how he bounces off of... Morph turns into Blob, and then he bounces off of him. So that was... Because I talked to Jake about it, and I was... Because someone had called it... Was it charging the deck or something? Or cutting the deck? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really clever. But it's the whole... It's not just Wolverine and Remy. It's also... There's Morph, and, So there was more to it. And I was like, all right, that's cool. But what did I think of it? I lost my mind. I mean, I had seen it... I'd seen pieces of that whole fight throughout the ADR process like 2 years ago or something, but I had forgotten it for the most part, so long ago. And then to see people live reacting, I just watched every reaction I could, like all the reaction videos. And consistently it was people like, wow, cool, wow, awesome. And then them screaming when that part happened. I was like, yeah. Yeah, it was surreal. I've been lucky to be part of a lot of like big-ish projects that people are like, oh, cool, yeah, I think I remember that. But like, to be part of something that people are talking about now that they're excited about is weird and incredible. And it's what everyone hopes for when you make something. Because with streaming, so many things just disappear. And even when they're out, you hope, even if people are talking about it, that might be it. That might be the whole peak of it. So for this to have gotten the reaction it has, and for people to be texting me and emailing me that I haven't spoken to in like 25 years it's insane. So that reaction was nuts. I was very excited.
And I would say you probably even are going to see, like, in 2 weeks at the conclusion of the season, there are people that are waiting to watch this entire thing in its entirety. They're like not doing the week by week, which is incredibly brave because of all the spoilers that are going out online. So I feel like you're going to get a second wave of like all those people shooting you those messages.
I hope so. It's I mean, I think that X-Men's evergreen always, forever, because of what it is and the way things are sort of an analogy for what's going on in real life. There's never a bad time to watch it, unless society sorts its stuff out, which would be great. It doesn't. I'll sacrifice X-Men being relevant for society being a cakewalk. But anyway, you could always watch it anytime, and it pairs so well with, like, if you're just a fan of Marvel, at any point you can pick it up. So I'm hoping that it's something that people are constantly discovering. But yeah, the initial bump of people watching it week to week it's so exciting. I wish when I worked on Voltron, that was one of my biggest complaints, is we were still pretty new to this sort of streaming dump of like, here's 8 episodes or whatever. Yep. And if it had gone week to week, I think it would have reached so many more people, because, people would just sit and watch the whole season in one go. And then it was like, what was the point? Like you almost feel like it's this big flash in the pan. You're like, no, there was each episode was its own special thing. So I'm so glad people are getting to enjoy it in this way.
Yeah, 97 like wouldn't work as a one big binge dump, because of the way every episode ends is so crazy. Then we all end up talking about it for a week.
Episode 1 has a great moment with you where you're wearing the rock and roll midriff shirt, which blew up online and you embraced it. You want to talk about that for a second?
Sure.
Did you know that was happening, or was that you saw it when it went live for the first time scenario?
People started sending it to me, because it was also like, it's funny because like I had taken photos with the shirt on, which I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, oh, that's cool. Gambit wears that. I will wear that. I like it. I'm not cutting off the midriff because I want to be comfortable. Right. But yeah, because the funny thing about it is the photo was one that like none of us or the crew or anyone took. It was someone in the crowd had taken the photo and then put like a side by side. And then that's what kind of went viral, which is really, because it's also like a slightly blurry. The photo reminds me of the Oompa Loompa from the Willy Wonka experience, where she's kind of like mid something. And so it's a little grainy. And I thought it was
like you're moving and emoting, and it just,
and it's not the most flattering moment, but I love that that's what went viral. It's very funny. I was very honored and very like tickled by how fun and I don't know. It's just fun and weird, and I'm not trying to get that attention. I was just like, oh, neat, I'll wear the thing, and then that happened. I was like, okay, sure.
The amount of cosplays that popped up of people doing that shirt in the following weeks. You see cosplay like as moment in time scenarios. Like that one popped off really, really fast, at least on my social feed. So
yeah, same. Although I can't tell what's because of my own algorithm. It's like, Chihuahuas and Gambit are what and Halloween stuff I feel like are what pop up in my thing. So I wasn't sure if it was just because I was like, oh, I love Gambit, so it's all Gambit stuff, but I'm hearing from other friends that yes, it was not. It was not just me. It was everywhere. Although you run a Cyclops, you run a podcast named after Cyclops, so it's about X-Men. So
I actually have multiple social feeds to prevent that from happening, and it was happening on the other one. So
that's amazing. Yeah. All right, I love that.
If you ever do start a podcast or another one, if you have one already, like Chihuahuas and Gambit is a fantastic name.
Chihuahuas again. Yeah, I'll write that down.
Speaking of the online community embracing you, and then kind of you and the other stars of the show embracing the community, you, Lenore, and Matt had started just playing into this whole character relationship off screen, and it like some of the pictures like at panels and stuff like that have all been amazing. What's that like? Because you didn't get to record any of this in person. You guys all did this separate from each other, correct?
Yeah, except once. Lenore and I got to record something. I don't remember what the hell it was, but they wanted to just as kind of like a thing. They brought us in together, like sort of late in the game to do ADR or something. And so we met there. But yeah, otherwise it's all been separate. The social media thing, because Matthew's a really good friend and we've known each other for years. We've worked on a ton of stuff together, and it's it got to the point where anytime one of us would book something, the other one would text the other and be like, are you on this? You know, because we were suddenly being pushed onto different projects together where like he was Doom guy in Doom and I was the intern who was talking in his ear the whole time. And then in the Crudes, I was Thunk and he was Phil in the series. And then he was, oh God, what was he? It's like a bunch of other random things where, we worked on God of War together where I was Atreus and he was Kratos doing all the previs. And then we worked on Jedi Fallen Order where he was Bode and a couple other characters and I was Cal. And this is all like pre-stuff where we're on the volume together for hundreds and hundreds of hours. So we know each other very, very well. So it's just fun. I mean, it's just kind of us. Like I talk to him almost every day where we're texting about something. So yeah, it was just kind of our weird humor to be like, at some point, I was sitting in a booth with a bunch of people and they all got up and left. And then I guess I was sitting there alone. There's that one photo of me sitting there alone while Matthew and Lenore are, you know, like sharing wine or something. And they're like, AJ, turn around. So I just turned and I got immediately what was going on. And I was like, all right, I'll look I'll smirk or look sad. And yeah, it's a lot of fun because it's, you know, they're such lovely people. So it's fun to just make silly jokes. And, you know, they posted a photo together the other day where they did like a signing at a comic shop. And I was like, hey, 6 feet apart, you know? Like, social distancing. I don't know. It's just us being stupid.
So obviously at some point as you're going through this whole process, you get the big reveal about your character's fate in episode 5. How do you find out about that? Like, is it a phone call or a meeting, or do you just get a script dropped off that you're reading through for the first time and you're just like, oh shit, this is happening?
So the two stories. One, funny, on Voltron, my character doesn't make it all the way through and they forgot to tell me. And the next morning I was trying to get a hold of someone and I was like, hey, what the hell? Am I dead? And they're like, oh, sorry, someone else died. And we told them, but we forgot to tell you. And I was like, that doesn't make me feel better.
Right.
That just means I'm less important. So that was upsetting. But no, with this, they called me and they were like, hey, like, welcome to the show, but we're killing you off after 5 episodes. And I was like, so I was sad. I was very, very sad because yeah, it's, you know, a dream job to get to voice Gambit and it's like, oh my God, I'm on X-Men. And they're like, not so fast. So yeah, it really hurt. But I was also, you know, with anything like that, to feel sorry for myself or to be sad is such a hilarious waste of energy because it's like, wow, I'm part of X-Men. I was sad for me, you know, and sad for Gambit because I love the character of Gambit and I just want to see him do a million things. And I feel like Gambit fans never get to see Gambit really. He's always kind of in the background and kind of gets pushed aside a lot. So I was like, you know, he gets to really shine in this in a way that I think that we haven't gotten to see before, but then it's a hard stop. So I was like, no! Yeah, once I read that 5th script, I was like, no one's done this with Gambit before. No one's really made Gambit a full, and not to say that the comics haven't, but like in cartoons, I feel, or in the animation, I feel like he was always kind of, other than that one episode was Externally Yours, where you get to see a bit more about his history and stuff. I don't know. I felt so important that I was like, this is fine. This is okay. You know, to quote, was it Theoden, where he says, if this is to be our end, then we will make such an end. I was like, that's cool. Also, R.I.P. Bernard Hill. Very sad about that.
I don't know if you're reading the X-Men comics on the regular, but it's either Fall of the House of X or Rise of X. I can't remember which of the two series it is, but they actually have close to the recreation of what your scene was from Remember It in like an alternate future Gambit kind of scenario.
Oh,
and
crazy.
I was just like, oh, AJ did this first. But it's
crazy.
It's
I'm
literally
not up to date on I read X of Swords and I've read some stuff that my friend John has just been like, read this, but then I immediately forget what it's connected to and I just enjoy them as their own little micro thing.
What was it like doing the performance of the conversation with Gambit and Rogue where she's telling about the relationship with Magneto and you basically had to be like, we're just friends. Like, can you talk about the process on that? Because you've as a character had some pretty lighthearted moments, and this is obviously such a serious difference in there.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading it, it hits because we've all been through it to some degree. I mean, everyone's been through that feeling of like, oh, okay, you know, I need to respectfully step back. And I like that Gambit is mature enough and has the presence of mind and understands what the stakes are and what the situation is enough to be respectful and say, you know, just friends, mon ami. It was something that I could relate to. So when we were doing the actual scene, I was like, oh, okay. I get this. That said, Meredith Lane, who does our voice directing, she read those scenes with me, and we went back and forth and sort of tweaked and figured out how hurt, how reassuring he was, what's the line between, you don't want him to see like impetulant and angry, it very easily could have him be like, just friends, and then he storms out. But yeah, it was a scene, that whole episode, I mean, we worked a lot. It's hard when you can't see the animation to really understand where they are, how close they are.
The body language.
Faces. Yeah, because you're doing your own thing and then you hope that matches. I didn't know the thing about the cards in the fire. I mean, maybe it said in the script, but it's not something I was consciously thinking of. But yeah, it's the kind of thing where you run it through and you just kind of try to dial in and find what's the mood. The same thing with the end scene with Remember It and stuff. I remember we had alternate versions where it was like screamed out. And I remember thinking that felt really bad. And we talked about it where I was just like, I really don't like the part where he yells it. It just feels, bleh. And we all agreed. It wasn't just me, but we were all like, yeah, that doesn't work. Because of the energy of that scene, it felt so much better when he was, remember it. You felt that. As opposed to being like, remember it, like you don't want it to sound like it was Frankenstein and Van Helsing who's just going, that's my deep cut reference of the day. Who apparently was an opera singer. Did you guys ever hear this story?
No.
The guy that they cast is, the movie Van Helsing is a point of bizarre fascination for me. The guy they cast as Frankenstein was an opera singer. So if you notice, if you watch the movie again, which I highly recommend.
Well, now I'm gonna with this new context. So.
Yeah, he every time he has to emote or do anything, there's all this vibrato in it where he'll be like, no, and it's so operatic and theatrical. And now that I have that as context, I view everything through that lens, and it makes the movie funnier, more enjoyable. It's like, oh yeah, they just got an opera singer to play. Of course, that's why he's like when he falls. It's great. I love that movie, unironically and ironically.
So we got to hang out at Scum and Villainy where they were doing, the various cast appearances the week before Remember It aired. And, what's it like when something like this is coming? And obviously not just for the sake of NDAs and stuff like that, but you also you want to give those moments to the audience. What's it like having to hold something like that back as you can't reveal it before it goes live, obviously? It's
weird. I imagine it must be what being a politician feels like to some degree, where you have this knowledge, but what's being on the show? You ever watch the show The Traitors, where it's basically like, I'm a traitor and I might betray you, and I have to pretend that I'm also one of the happy-go-lucky people that are like, no, or Werewolf. It's like the game Werewolf. Where
I know way too much about Werewolf.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's just like, I swear I'm innocent. It's that nobody knows that that's coming, but because it's at the back of my head, it feels weird. I'm like, hey, I'm glad you love Gambit. Oh boy, it's tough because you obviously, NDA aside, emotionally, it's weird. It's just very, very weird. There's no way to say it other than oh man, I know things. And you don't want to disappoint people, and you just want everyone to have fun. And so when you're out there and you're meeting people like Scum and Villainy and stuff, which by the way, I did the 4th week for a reason.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. I mean, you just act like everything's normal, I guess is the way it is. And because you don't ever want to spoil, it's like knowing someone's Christmas present, whether it's good or bad, is you may have that knowledge, but ultimately you're just there to enjoy the moment. And so that's all I can do.
I think the next day, because I obviously wasn't going to message you at 1 o'clock in the morning, but I woke up and I was like, holy shit. I think that was literally what I said to you.
Yeah, it was quite the amount of DMs and things I got after episode 5 was just like, yep, this hit. And people, the funny thing is I don't really know how to answer that question you asked, because it is weird, because it's like, yeah, of course I'm not going to say anything or hint at it, because I wouldn't want to, even as NDA aside, I being surprised by stories is the joy of stories. That's why watching Game of Thrones or something, the thrill of being like, I cannot believe that happened, is one of the greatest gifts. It's so much fun, and it brings people together, and you're so excited. It's the reason people, I assume, like sports, is it's unpredictable. I don't, because I don't understand sports. So the day after Remember It aired, the people were tweeting at me like, why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you say something? Or why? And I'm like, what are you talking about? In what world? That just seems so absurd. It would be like Harrison Ford before The Force Awakens being like, he dies. What is that? I don't. And I get it. It's just people saying, they're joking, but it's a weird reaction to have, because obviously my job is to guard that information with my life. So I would never say anything. I want to work.
That was actually the next question. I only have three more. Rod, if you have others, please hop in with it. But it was like, can you talk a little bit about how the community has reached out to you with your character's sacrifice and stuff like that?
It's been odd. The way people have reacted has been everywhere from anger to joy to like the accusatory, like, why didn't you say something? How dare you killed Gambit? But also, that's the negative side of it. But it mostly
because you wrote it, obviously.
Well, that's I think because we humans are such emotional creatures, and not everyone is capable of understanding when they're feeling emotional what they're actually saying. And I think when you just burst out an emotion at some stranger on Twitter, you're gonna say some weird stuff. But yeah, I don't write the show. It would have been called The Gambit Show, starring Gambit and Gambit, if it were ever up to me. But yeah, it's funny. The reactions were mostly positive. Mostly people just being very, very sweet and supportive and being like, thank you, and this is great, and I loved it, and it's one of the greatest moments in the history of Gambit, which is awesome. So that was the majority of it, getting so much art and DMs. Like, I had to put up a little note in my DMs and be like, hey guys, you got to give me some time to respond to things, because I'm like, I can't keep up, and I'm just not seeing friends and people, and because it's just, it's tough. It's great. I love it. I feel very flattered, but there's also just a certain amount of volume of stuff that I'm getting from certain people and new people, and it could be overwhelming, but it's all love, and it's all, people that are, for the most part, like, oh my God, that was awesome. But it happened all at once. It's kind of like a piñata of reactions where I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Because I was really nervous. I was honestly a little sick to my stomach over the whole thing because I was so worried that the reaction wasn't going to be positive. I thought it was just going to be vitriol, because I was like, I love Gambit so much, and as a Gambit fan, I want to protect him. And I was worried that that would be the dominant reaction, as people being like, how could you do this to me? Which it was not, thankfully. People really appreciated how mature and how well written and just, it's one of the greatest moments in animation and X-Men, at least I think. And so I think because of that, because of the level of quality and storytelling, people were really, really receptive and enjoyed it in a way that I could never have predicted, because I didn't know I hadn't seen the episode from beginning to end. I'd only seen what pieces I had dubbed over or what they showed me. So it was really weird to sort of watch it live with everyone else exactly at midnight,
We've even sent it to you. We go to Scum every week aside from premiere week, because I was literally up in San Francisco that week. But what we've noticed is there are certain moments that the crowd is loud and screaming, and it's almost like going to the Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard for Spider-Man. It's
right.
It's
Yeah,
big,
totally.
It's energetic. The thing that was the wildest for us was being there, and as the remember it moment happened, it got quiet. And that place is never quiet during the show. And that was wild to be like, oh yeah, because not everybody here has watched it at midnight the night before. There are people that are experiencing that moment in real time in front of us. And that part is wild to see those emotions hit from a group of strangers. Because, we know some of the people there, but for the most part, they're just, fellow bar patrons and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of wild when all of a sudden a bar goes quiet from an emotional scene. So
yeah, I saw the footage someone had posted. Maybe it was Kevin, or maybe it was Scum and Villainy. I don't remember, where it was just, or maybe it was you. Footage of the bar, just when
that was
happening.
Us. Yep.
Okay, was it you guys? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was weird. I mean, because I'd been to that bar a bunch of times, and when I was there for, I think it was Jubilee's episode.
Yeah, the last happy episode.
The Motenda episode.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was loud, and people were talking and people were coming up to me and asking for stuff. And so I wasn't, there would be no way in hell I could have watched the episode there for the first time for that. So that's really cool, because yeah, the whole, even people that were just, there were some people that were just there at the bar,
Right.
They were there for fun. That would be a very strange place to watch that episode for the first time. So for people to hush during it is really cool and flattering.
Yeah, and without, I know it's been posted about, so I'm not saying anything that's behind the scenes info, but I know that a lot of the cast chose to not view it at Scum and Villainy that night, even though a lot of people were in LA, because people knew it was going to be such an emotional episode, and that wasn't the kind of thing they wanted to have their reactions in front of a live audience, which I totally understand.
Yeah, that's why I said I'll do week 4, because I was like, I'm not doing this, because they asked me, do you want to do the 5th week? And I said, oh, absolutely not, because I knew that it would be almost like the Red Wedding or something, a Game of Thrones, and then being like, what did you think? It's like, you're not, for me, when I see a movie or something that really moves me, I want to be quiet and I want to think about it. So if there was a celebrity, or not to say that I'm a celebrity, that's a weird thing to say, but if there's someone there from the production that I could vent that too, I would probably be a mess. You know what I mean? Like, and so I was just like, I forget who it was. I think it was JP, and I don't think he knew what was going to happen that episode. And I was like, hey, just so you know, get out of there.
Because JP was there that week. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, you don't know what people's reactions are going to be, and obviously you want to be there to support people but it's hard for us. We're people too, so we're not therapists. We don't know what to do with ourselves. We're just like, yeah, it hurts for us too. So yeah, that's why I was like, I'll be there the week before, and then I'll disappear.
In '92 in X-Men, I was a little kid when I was watching that, and me and my brother always saw as Gambit as really cool. My brother, impersonated Gambit all the time. I'm sure everybody did, which is really wild to see a little Korean American kid run around the house pretending to be
that. That's beautiful.
Fake Cajun. To now, and remember it where he fulfills kind of his like ultimate destiny, right? Like that he became the hero that Xavier always believed in him. And you've expressed several times that he was always been your favorite character. You showed up to audition with a phone case with Gambit on it.
Yeah, which was pre the audition. Obviously, I wasn't. Yeah, like I just loved. Yeah.
Did you see the Gambit we got in '97 in '92?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the comics, it was, you get the sense that he has in his first, I don't super remember well what happens in, was it 266, his first issue where he meets a young Storm and he's trying to figure out what to do with her and how to help her. And what is it? It's like Mother Bot or something. What's the name of the character that's like trying to Nanny or something?
Nanny.
Yeah. I mean, he was kind of heroic from the beginning. He was just doing it as on his own terms in the way that a Han Solo kind of does. They're very self-interested, but at the same time, they have their own weird heroism that may stem from, again, them being self-interested, but ultimately he cares about Rogue deeply. He cares about, the rest of the X-Men. I mean, I think it's our sensibilities as to what, I mean, the original cartoon was meant to be, for as sophisticated and intense and adult as it was a Saturday morning cartoon, essentially, where it was like, yeah, we're just telling what's the next chapter, what's the next thing. And so there wasn't a lot of opportunities for Gambit, who was kind of this, they talked about, he was new, they didn't really know what to do with him yet. No one had heard him talk or knew much about him. So they were still figuring him out, I think. But with 97, we've had so much time to read stories, and there's been so many comics and games and things where he's developed that I think that we as the younger generation who grew up with Gambit kind of want to see him as a more mature character and want to see him as a hero, because we identified with, in the same way Jubilee. I mean, Jubilee has had such a big arc or change, I think, from the original, where, I didn't like Jubilee as a kid. I found her annoying, and that was just because I was a kid, and I was like, oh, get this kid out of my adult show, or, that I thought was mature. But I eventually learned to love her as time went on, because, I think like Gambit, she was maybe a little too, I don't want to say not fleshed out, but was very much so, kind of stayed within a box of characteristics to some degree. Yeah. And I think that as I've read more and as I've watched more, and especially with this new show, they're people, I hope. I feel like they're more developed as human beings and more in line with how we view ourselves as mature adults and, mature to some degree. Yeah, I think that's a lot of the heavy lifting was done in between the shows as far as fleshing those characters out. And then 97 just picked that up and went, okay, this is who we envision these characters to be. And now we're going to add a little more of that.
So before I get to the final question, do you think we can get a Cyclops is waiting for me from Gambit?
Sure.
Cyclops is waiting for me, mon ami.
Awesome. Yeah, selfishly, I want one of those from every character, because you all got to do your previously on X-Men, and
I was so excited about that.
Yeah.
Just to do the previously on X-Men, I was like, you want me to say that? Because it was always Cyclops, and I was, read the previously on X-Men, and so I was excited when I finally got to do it. I was like, I get to do this, it's so cool. Yeah, that was a big moment. I honestly probably read it like 40 times because I didn't want to stop. I was like, all right, I think we got it. And I was like, no, again.
Yeah, 45 for safety. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So finally, if someone was being introduced to X-Men 97 and your portrayal of Gambit for the first time, no baggage on the character, no preconceived notions, what do you want them to take away from Gambit?
Ooh, interesting question. What do I want them to take away from Gambit? I think that, and the reason I've always been attracted to him as a character is you can be unconventional and you can be sort of outside of the norm of masculinity or fashion or whatever it is, and be have lots of depth and be a full, well-rounded human being who is interesting and mature and has feelings. Like, to speak to what you had said before about, like, did you view Gambit as being heroic or as fully fleshed out in the beginning as you do now as I did. I mean, I always kind of really viewed him as a full character. And the thing that's always I've been attracted to is he's a guy who wears a pink chest with a trench coat and weird boots. And like, I've never really found the sort of standard masculine view of a man to be very interesting or appealing. I think it's really boring. And I love that Gambit has his weird gloves and his staff, and he's got sort of a fun, chaotic, feminine energy that is just odd. And for a kid, there's this weird sort of, like I'm trying to think like David Bowie or Jack Sparrow. There's that roguish sort of you can't pin them down quality of where they fit into society. And I love that he is kind of an example of that sort of weirdness and that sort of nonconformity that I always kind of aspire to. I mean, I know I dress kind of plain and boring, but like, as far as my attitude goes, I don't necessarily try to maintain any specific expectation. And I love that Gambit defies expectations and yet is a fully realized person that presents as kind of absurd. And I love that. I love the absurdity, and I hope that people could take away that you could be weird and you could be strange and you could still be cool and still be, mature. And I just love that about him. I think that is the core of what makes me love him so much. And it's the pink chest plate. And he throws cards. I mean, for God's sakes, like, how insane is that? It's like, what's your power? It's like, well, I charge things. It's like, oh, like pins or bullets? It's like, no, cards.
Playing cards. The pink chest plate. I remember when John and I first started this podcast, we were talking about Night of the Sentinels, the very first episode. And we were like, everything you need to know about Gambit, so much of it is in that first scene where he's in body armor, pink body armor, hitting on a door clerk. At the mall.
Good.
Like Rogue and Storm are in casual, out of uniform. They're just meeting Jubilee. That's just what she wears as a 90s kid. But Gambit's like, I'm going to go in pink and turquoise body armor.
So great. It's so great. Well, the crop top in that first episode, when I saw it, I was like, yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't conform to any expectations other than whatever Gambit's expectations of himself are. And I love that. And he's also kind of pushing boundaries. He kind of can make you uncomfortable with his confidence. And I like that. I like that there's a feeling of like, oh, this is just a random guy making beignets in our kitchen. Like, not that I don't know who he is, but yeah, I just love his comfort with himself, but which can also be a facade, as we all know. It's obviously there's a bit of a facade to it, but it's just fun. I mean, why not have a facade that's fun and adorable and pink?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for joining us and all your time today. If people do want to hit you up, what is the best spot for them to do that? Instagram, X, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Don't.
That's my answer.
Yeah, that's my answer. No, Instagram is probably the best way. I mean, you can try to tweet at me, but I try not to use Twitter too much because it gives me anxiety. It's such a mess. I hate seeing like what's trending and I'm just like, ugh, unless it's Gambit, I don't care. Or like Jurassic Park or something. I don't know. Unless it's the dinosaurs are out and they're coming to get me. Actually, I think I'd welcome that. Be like, oh, what a way to go. Eaten by raptors. Yeah, just Instagram at AJ LoCascio. Good luck spelling that.
We'll make sure it's in all the description and stuff like that to make it easier for everybody. And finally, if any of you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram posts of this episode. And if you like what you heard, we appreciate a rating on the Spotcast app of your choosing. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox. Most people don't even know what that one is, but we still get downloads on it every week. So we do it.
CastBox. All right.
That's the best endorsement CastBox can ask for right now.
Yeah, CastBox. All right.